Hi everyone, welcome to my channel Bibbity Bobbity Books. My name is Ellie and this is going to be a wrap up of some recent reads. So it's pretty self-explanatory really. I'm basically just going to go through some books that I've recently read and let you know my thoughts and feelings on them. I will say that I normally make notes for this kind of video and I did this time round, but my laptop has decided to crash at a really inconvenient time and now is a good time for me to film, so I don't want to wait for my laptop to sort itself out before filming this video. So we're just going to do it anyway, we're going to wing it. So apologies if this is a little bit chaotic, but we're just going to run with it and I'm just going to let you know my thoughts and feelings on some of these books. So without further ado, let's jump in and just chat about some books. So the first book that I want to talk to you about today is one that is quite different for me, and that is The Crimson Moth by Kristin Ciccarelli. So this is a book that I actually received for my birthday and it's a little bit out of my comfort zone. It's a young adult fantasy romance, which is a genre that I used to really enjoy but recently have not been loving. So I had very low expectations going into this book, but I will say I was pleasantly surprised and I did actually end up quite enjoying this one. I did have some gripes with it though, but we will get into that in a second. This is a book that is set in a world where witchcraft is banned. There's been this huge purge, all of the witches are being rounded up and executed, and you guessed it, our main character is in fact a witch, but she has to obviously keep that a secret from everyone around her. So she pretends to be this vapid socialite during the day, and then at night she takes on this alter ego. She becomes this vigilante character called the Crimson Moth, and she basically goes and she tries to rescue fellow witches and to save them from their fate, to save them from execution. And then one day she decides to date this witch hunter because she wants to glean information from him, but also because rumours have been going around that are connecting our main character Rune with the Crimson Moth, and she can't have that, so she needs to throw people off the scent. So she decides to date the most infamous witch hunter there is, which is a man called Gideon. And yeah, it's a fantasy romance, so I'm sure you can see where the story is heading. But yeah, our main character and Gideon have this enemies to lovers thing going on. I will say Gideon isn't an idiot, so he knows that our main character Rune has been connected to the Crimson Moth, so he is dating her also to glean information and to try and find out and investigate what's going on with her and if she is connected to the Crimson Moth. And so there is that trope where both characters are you know, they're dating each other, but they're doing it for their own reasons, and they kind of know the other person is too, so you're never quite sure what is real and what is fiction. And I will say I quite enjoyed the world building in this one. I liked all the witchy elements to it. I also quite liked the magic system. The magic system does involve blood though, so please do be warned there are references to, you know, blood and also things like self-harm, because that is the way that magic is conducted within this world, so please do be warned of that. But I quite liked the darker side to it and the witchy world building. I will say I wasn't super fussed on the two love interests. I didn't really believe their chemistry. It was very much lust rather than love, and I was much more invested actually in our main character and her best friend and their relationship. That was much more compelling for me, which is quite interesting. And there was also a very questionable plot line which involved basically the witch hunter Gideon being forced to, or being encouraged to, basically try and get our main character naked so that he can check to see if she has any scars, because the witches obviously have to use blood to perform magic. So if he can find any witch scars, then that would obviously show her as guilty. And I found that whole plot line a little bit icky, to be honest with you. So yeah, there were some questionable choices in this book, but for the most part I actually found it really entertaining. It was very fast paced, it was really easy to fly through this one, and it was just a bit of fun and was something that was very different to what I've been reading this year, and I actually quite liked the change of pace. So yeah, I think this came at a good time for me. It was fun. I think you would enjoy it if you like books like Serpent and Dove, and if you like, you know, romantasy, if you like enemies to lovers, you know, then I think you're going to have a fun time with this one. The next book that I want to talk to you about is The Return of the King by J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, I filmed a dedicated reading vlog for this one where I talk in depth about my thoughts and feelings, so I'm going to keep this pretty brief. This is obviously the third book in the Lord of the Rings series. I say series, it's one big long story really, but it's broken up into 3 books and that's the way that it's been published. And I enjoyed this finale. I do already enjoy this series, I will say that. I'm a big fan of the movies, and so I'm already attached to the characters, I'm already invested in the story, I already have that love there. So going to the books was a fun time, but I did keep thinking about the movies and sort of seeing the scenes play out from that. So I can't say what my experience would be with the books if I didn't already love the movies, if that makes sense. But yes, I enjoyed this third and final book. I think it is astounding what J.R.R. Tolkien did in terms of world building and the amount of time and dedication that he put towards building this entire world with its own history, with its own mythology, you know, the maps, the world, all the different people, all the different fantasy races. It is so extensive and there is so much information to sink your teeth into, which is very impressive. And I will say that is probably the main focus and the main highlight of these books. I did also love the friendship between Frodo and Sam, and especially in this third and final book, because they're really pushed to their limits in this third book. And so we have some really beautiful scenes that just show the dedication that the 2 characters have towards each other, the love they have for each other, and just how far they will go to be successful in their mission. And so I absolutely loved all the scenes with Frodo and Sam in this book. I will say I don't think action is J.R.R. Tolkien's strong point, and so I did find that a little bit disappointing, just because obviously in the movies it is so fun, it's so actiony, and there's lots of great battle scenes and things like that, whereas in the books I feel like those things pass quite quickly and are a little bit anticlimactic. It did take a while to finish. There were a lot of endings in this third book, which is a little bit unusual because, you know, you think of the story wrapping up when I'm sure this isn't a spoiler because it's a really common story, but you know, when the ring is destroyed, Tolkien takes a lot of time then talking about the aftermath and what happens with our characters afterwards and tying up all the loose ends and giving everybody happy endings. And for me, that made it lose a little bit of momentum. I wasn't so invested. I didn't really care as much. I hate to say it, but there were some sweet things and it was nice to see our characters having their happy ever after endings. But yeah, the ending for me in this final book did drag slightly, but overall I am just a big fan of the Lord of the Rings story and the franchise, and I'm very glad that I have now read the actual original stories. Okay, the next book that I read was The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay. So this is an adult horror story. It's a psychological horror, but I would say that a lot of the horror elements come from this feeling of claustrophobia. It has an isolated setting and it's also quite graphic and gory as well. So I was very excited to get stuck into this book because I read A Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay quite a few years ago, and it is one of my favourite horror books. So I was very excited to try more of this author's work, and I found this a compelling read, but I definitely didn't love it as much as A Head Full of Ghosts, I'm afraid to say. But I think that's just because of the niche of horror that this is. This, for me, felt a little bit more, I don't want to say slashery because it's definitely not a slasher, but there was definitely a lot of sort of survival elements in here, a lot of gruesome, graphic, gory scenes, and those are the kinds of things that I'm not as interested in when it comes to horror. I prefer things that are either a little bit more psychological and lean more into that psychological side, or things that are a little bit fantastical or a little bit cosmic. I like cosmic horror too. So it's just not quite my preferred niche of horror, but I will say that it is a really interesting premise and it did keep me turning the pages. So the setup for this story is that there's a family who are staying in this cabin by a lake. They're on holiday. So it's 2 dads and their young daughter, And the story opens up with the daughter playing out in the yard. She's catching grasshoppers, I think it is. And then she's approached by this stranger, this really tall man who comes and speaks with her for a little while. And then some of this tall stranger's friends appear from the forest as well. And they're all wearing similar outfits and they're carrying these like man-made weapons. So obviously our little girl is scared, so she runs to go and find her dad's, and basically this man and these strangers approach and they are demanding entry, and they are saying that they need the family's help to save the world, and that the family are going to have to make some really difficult decisions, but basically the fate of the world is in their hands, and the story goes on from there. So yeah, it has this claustrophobic feeling because it all takes place in this cabin, and it does play on things like, you know, obviously fear, survival, but also doubt as well, because our main characters are, you know, they're heightened, they're in this really stressful situation and they're being told some strange things, and so they're not quite sure what to believe, and yeah, it gets very, very tense. And yeah, it had me flipping through the pages. I will say though that Paul Tremblay does use flashbacks quite a lot in this story, and that's not necessarily my preferred way of storytelling, because I just feel like, particularly in a story like this, it really gets in the way of the momentum, because it is such a tense and on your seat type story, but then we keep getting thrown back to the past to flesh out our characters. And I know why Paul Tremblay is doing it is because he wants us to become closer to the characters so that we understand the reasons why they are acting the way that they are, and to get closer to them and to be more invested in them. But at the same time, it was a little bit frustrating when you're, you know, on the edge of your seat, you're wanting to know how they're going to get through this thing, and then we're just thrown back in time and you have to read, you know, chapters and passages on stuff that happened in the past when all you want to know is what's going to happen next in the present. So yeah, that was a little bit frustrating for me, but yeah, there were some really emotional moments in here, and a really intriguing plot as well that keeps you questioning throughout. So yeah, it had some positives but also some negatives for me. I do also want to say that the ending is quite an open ending, so if that's something that you don't like, then be warned of that going in. But yeah, I'm glad that I read it, and I am definitely going to read more from this author because, like I say, I really enjoyed A Head Full of Ghosts. This one was okay for me, and so yeah, I'm interested to see what else he has in his back catalogue. Okay, so the next book that I read was Don't Let the Forest In by C.G. Drews. Now, I have lent this copy out to a friend, so I don't have it with me to hold up, but I will put a picture on the screen for you. So again, I read this one in a recent vlog, so I feel like I've spoken on this channel a little bit already about this book, but I appreciate you might not have seen that vlog, so I'll do my best to let you know my thoughts now. So yes, this is a young adult horror book. And this one really surprised me because, again, I'm always a little bit dubious of YA, just because it's not my age bracket now, and I tend to prefer adult fiction these days. However, I'm so glad that I read this one because I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think it is incredible what the author has managed to do with this relatively short horror story. So the premise for this book is that we're following our main character. I think he's called Andrew, and he is a kid. He goes to boarding school and he is struggling a lot with his mental health. He's got quite a lot going on. He is very anxious, he struggles to fit in, and there's obviously a lot going on bubbling beneath the surface, and he gets a lot of solace from writing these twisted fairy tales. So he enjoys writing, he likes, you know, creating these stories as a bit of escapism, but he feels like no one really understands him or understands his stories other than his best friend Thomas, who loves his stories. And Thomas is an artist and he actually likes drawing some of the monsters from Andrew's stories, and so the two of them have this really close bond. And yeah, something's a little bit off though at the beginning of the school year. Andrew notices that Thomas is acting differently. He seems to be keeping secrets from him, and so he decides to follow him, and he discovers that the monsters that Thomas has been drawing are actually coming to life. And so in other words, the monsters from Andrew's stories are now real, they're in front of them, and the two boys have to go out into the forest each night to defeat these monsters to protect the school. So that is kind of the bare bones of the story really, but there is a lot more to it. It's definitely one of those books where you can read between the lines. There are a lot of themes going on, and there's a lot of stuff that perhaps isn't being said that you can interpret, and it's such a beautiful story. Lots of great themes of trauma, of bullying, of self-identity, discovering your sexual identity as well, and love, of course, as well, an obsession, because these two characters are kind of growing closer and closer together, so we see how that develops and what that means for the story and for the characters. And, you know, grief, anxiety, mental health, there's a lot going on, and it's all presented in this really poetic style as well, which is, again, is something that I'm not normally a massive fan of. I do quite like a little bit of flowery writing, but sometimes I can find that a little bit off-putting and takes me out of the story a little bit. But I think it really worked in this particular story because it really reflects our main character Andrew's headspace, because he is quite a flowery character himself. He likes to write these twisted fairy tales and use poetic writing for those. So the fact that the whole story is written in that way and it's almost all written as its own twisted fairy tale just makes sense, and it fits for some of the themes, and it really does well that idea of beauty but also horror, you know, beauty and ugly at the same time. You've got this beautiful lyrical writing, you've got themes of love and things like that, but beneath the surface you also have the horror elements there too. We have these monsters, we have scary stuff going on, we've got issues bubbling underneath the surface too. So yeah, thoroughly enjoyed this one. Definitely want to reread it at some point as well, because it's one of those stories where you get to the end and you have some reveals and it makes you want to go back to the beginning and read it all again. So yeah, I'm looking forward to giving it another read through, but would highly recommend it to you if you enjoy young adult horror, if you like poetic writing styles, if you like things that are you know, like a twisted sort of fairy tale type thing. There are some horrific moments, as you would expect too, so do check out content warnings and things as well if you need to. But yeah, I personally really enjoyed it, and it really took me by surprise actually, so I'm so glad that I picked it up. The next book that I read was actually a reread. So I reread Nevermore, The Trials of Morrigan Crow by Jessica Townsend. So I listened to this one on audio, and I'm trying to get through these books because the fourth book has recently come out, so I'm going back and rereading all of the books leading up to that because it's been a while since I've read these stories. And yeah, this is actually a middle grade story, so it's a children's book. But I think it is a story that can appeal to a wider audience. It's definitely one of those middle grades that I think adults can enjoy. I mean, I know I certainly really enjoy it. I think it's so creative, it's so fun, it's so well crafted, it's got lovable characters, so much heart and so much creativity, and I just thoroughly enjoy these stories. So it was a joy to go back and re-listen to the first book. If you don't know anything about this book or this series, it's a fantasy, and we follow our main character Morrigan Crow, and she was actually born on Eventide, and because of that she is believed to be cursed. So basically all children that are born on Eventide are said to die early. They have this tragic fate. They all die, I think it's by their 11th or 12th birthday, and they're thought to be cursed. So basically the whole town around them blames them for anything and everything that goes wrong. So basically if Morrigan Crow just happens to look at someone's cat and then they get poorly, they blame her for it. If she wishes someone good luck and then, you know, something goes wrong, it's all blamed on Morrigan Crow because she is a cursed child. So Morrigan Crow's had this really difficult childhood and upbringing. She has a distance from her family because they don't want to get close to her because they know that she's going to have this tragic fate. So yeah, she's not had it easy, shall we say, and then the fated day comes when she is destined to die, and basically she ends up getting whisked away. She gets saved by this man called Jupiter North, who pops up. He basically wants to enroll her into a series of trials to win a place into this wondrous society, which is basically this magic school, this really prestigious magic school in this magical place called Nevermore. So Morrigan is saved, she goes to this magical city, she goes and stays in this magical hotel with Jupiter North, and she enters into this series of trials. And the whole time she is doubting whether or not she should be there, because everyone who goes into these trials and who wants to become a member of the Wondrous Society has a knack or a magical ability, and that is the reason why they've been put forward to try out to go into this special school. But Morrigan Crow doesn't have a knack, she just thinks that she's normal. The only thing that is strange about her is the fact that her family thought that she was cursed, but turns out she didn't die on her 11th or 12th birthday, whatever it was. And so now she's like, well, why am I here? I don't know. And we're basically following along with her as yeah, she goes and does these trials, and it's a very wholesome story. It's a really creative setting. The world of Nevermore is just gorgeous. The hotel that she stays in is so fun. It's filled with all of these really interesting rooms. Her bedroom changes depending on her mood. You know, it might like create a cool lampshade or add an additional window or whatever to make it more and more custom to her preferences, which is really fun. And there's loads of really cool characters that live in the hotel as well. So there's this real found family element. You know, Morrigan Crow is finally, you know, making connections and getting that family that she feels like she's never had before. And yeah, it's just such a beautiful, creative story, and I just love it. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to carrying on and continuing on with this very fun middle grade series. And I think it's going to be the perfect book to put on for my commute to work, because I'm changing jobs soon and I'm going to have a longer commute, and these books are just so easy to listen to and just so fun, and it's like a nice way to start and end the day. So I'm very much looking forward to doing that. Okay, and the final book that I wanted to talk to you about today is The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst. So this is a cozy adult fantasy story, emphasis on the cozy, and I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was such a delight. In this story, we're following our main character. I've actually forgotten her name. Oh, it's Keela. We follow our main character, Keela, and she is a librarian. But there is this rebellion that's brewing in the background, and the book opens with Keela's library going up in flames because the rebels have arrived and they're destroying the library. So she flees, she saves as many spell books as she can, and she flees the library with her best friend, who just so happens to be a sentient spider plant. And the two of them escape on a boat and they go and sail to this remote island, which is actually where Keela grew up. So when she was younger, she lived with her parents on this island, and they obviously then moved into the city when she was a certain age. And since then her parents have died, but the house where they used to live is still there on the island. So she goes back to her childhood home, and so there's lots of beautiful moments where she's kind of recognizing things. She's finding things that were her parents, you know, like her mum's or her dad's, I can't remember which one, their old jam recipe and things like that. So it touches on like grief, but it's not acute. So enough time has passed since our main character's parents have died, whereby she still feels sad, but she also gets these nice moments where she's finding little soul shards of her parents, and you know, having these little memories and feeling more closer to them and connected to them now that she's back in her family home. So yeah, so she goes there and she decides to build a new life for herself, and she decides to open a jam shop. And yeah, she's integrating herself into the community, and she decides to use some of the spell books to help out the town, because it turns out that the town is looking a little bit worse for wear. And the reason for that is because the emperor in this world has banned common magic use. So basically it is only the elite, I think, who are allowed to use magic, and for that reason, you know, the common people have been affected. So there is this imbalance in magic, and that means that the island on the outskirts where Keela now lives is being affected by these big storms, these magical storms that happen. And you know, there's just stuff that isn't great. You know, crops are failing, there's not as many fish in the sea. You know, without the help of magic, it's just not thriving. And so Keela decides to maybe help out a little bit, even though magic is prohibited or is banned. However, she is aware that there is a revolution going on in the background, and the whole idea behind this revolution was to overthrow the emperor and his views about magic. So that gives her the confidence to maybe do a little bit of sneaky magic on the side, and it's only little things, you know, she only does little spells like, you know, things to make the trees heal, or things to make her raspberry bushes grow, and things like that, but it makes all the difference. And yeah, it's just a very wholesome story about her trying her best to help the town and to integrate herself into this community and to build a new life for herself and to make connections, because she has had a very isolated existence up until then. She was very much locked away in the stacks and she didn't really have many friends, so it's quite sweet watching her form friendships. And there is a little bit of a romance in there as well, but it doesn't saturate the whole story, which I appreciate. And it's quite a slow burn, and it's just a very wholesome romance, and yeah, just a lovely magical creative story. There's magical creatures in here, and you know, it's very whimsical. It has almost like a quality to it that reminds me of some of the stories that I used to read when I was younger, and for that reason I find it quite comforting. I think just because of some of the creative ideas in here and the magic and the whimsy, it's one of those stories where you don't want to think too hard about it, you just want to go in and have a fun time. And it has just enough stakes to keep it entertaining, which is great, because I do enjoy cozy fantasy, but sometimes I find them a little bit too mundane, and for that reason they can feel a little bit monotonous and a little bit boring, whereas this had enough going on with the plot to keep you hooked. It had enough stakes, enough tension to keep you turning the pages, but it didn't lose that cozy, comforting, cozy, I already said cozy, didn't I? But that nice, easy quality to it as well. So it was a good balance is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, if you're looking for something to cuddle up with this cozy season, then I definitely would recommend this one to you. And yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I'm very much looking forward to reading more in this series, because I think we've got a new book coming out very soon. So I'm looking forward to that. So yeah, those were some books that I've read recently and my thoughts and feelings. I'm sorry if this was a little bit rambly. Like I said, I don't have my notes with me, so it was just kind of my thoughts tumbling out. So I hope that I made some kind of sense. Do like this video if you did like it, because it really does help out my channel, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'm wishing you all the best. I hope that you're all doing well. I hope you've been reading some good books. Do let me know what you've been reading in the comment section down below, because I always love catching up with you there. And yeah, thank you so much, and I guess I'll see you next time with another video. Bye!